Welcome everybody to my very first 100 days video where I decided to revisit my old friend Terraria Classic for the first time in years. It's been a really long time since I've played Terraria Master Mode or Expert Mode, and an especially long time since I've tried my hand at a classic world. I wanted to attempt to experience Terraria again, like how it was the first time I played nearly 10 years ago when I was just a wee boy in grade school. A lot has changed in my life since then and in the world of Terraria, but I figured now was as good a time as any to play it again. I know the game has had plentiful updates since the version I played on those many years ago, but it's the idea of Terraria Classic, the intended experience, that I was trying to have happen again. To do these 100 days, I set a few rules for myself. Rule number 1, no sleeping or fast forwarding time. Rule number 2, no excessive world hopping for different biomes, pyramids, loot, etc. I wanted to spend the 100 days all in the same world. Rule number 3, try something new that I've never done before, because there's so much new content in Terraria that I've never even seen before or dabbled in. I figured this would be a perfect way to kind of spice up my experience and not only have that true and initial Terraria experience, but also something new that's gonna be fresh and spice the game up. That's the idea. And lastly, rule number 4, which is of course to have fun with the game, because at the end of the day, this is not the end all be all. This is not my life. This is me having fun on a video game to make a cool video for you guys and to have an experience that hopefully many of you will have just like I did. With these rules and concept of the video in mind, please don't forget that I am not a pro at this game and I do not know everything there is to know about Terraria. Everyone's experience in this game is different for a variety of factors, and with that being said, I hope you can get some form of entertainment out of this video. Also, I would greatly appreciate it if you all could drop a like in the video, because this took a long 40 hours to film and several more on top of that to edit. I'm really excited for what I've made here, and as I've never done something like this before, I've gone ahead and divided the video up into 9 parts, so there are timestamps for whichever sections you wish to watch, but for the full story and experience, I recommend watching the whole thing. And hey, if you don't finish it now, you can always come back and watch more later. Without further ado, let's get into the story of how I spent 100 days in Terraria Classic. On day 1, you would expect me to start off just how anyone else would start off in a sandbox game like Terraria, by getting wood. If you expected that, then you are right, because the first thing I did was hunt for some trees, but not just any trees, the massive ones. I did not find any by my spawn, so my next thought was just to start exploring the world until I did. We start by exploring the right side of my world and venturing through the desert. In the early game like this, these vultures and antelons can be pretty strong, so I had to find a way around them, especially since the trees I sought after were right on the other side. With a little intuitive thinking, I managed to find myself on the other side, next to those giant trees, and of course, I did what any sensible individual would do when faced with giant trees. I chopped them. After collecting some wood and cactus for basic gear, I decided to explore the left side of my world. Here I found myself running through the snow biome, flourished with boreal trees and dazzling snow falling from the sky. Upon my exit, I found myself stuck at the forefront of the corruption biome. I can't say whether I prefer Crimson or Corruption, but the Corruption was well suited to this video because it was part of that original experience I had all those years ago. Night fell quickly in this world, and as I know from previous experiences, the monsters come out to hunt. I fled back home and began the foundations for what would be my first base in my return to Terraria Classic. A night's worth of building led to a very basic home, but one that will protect me nonetheless. Now it was time to mine underground for those precious ores. I knew that Terraria Classic wasn't as difficult as Expert or Master Mode, so I didn't really feel the need to make suits of armor for every ore that I found. Instead, I focused on making the best pickaxe that I could, because that would ultimately help me get the next best pickaxe, and then I'd only use the higher tier ores for armor. This way I could still mine, but cut out the time spent on early game armor and ores. The next 2 days I would spend expanding my base so that new NPCs could move in that would aid my progress, and then continued mining for better gear. My goal was to get a solid base of tungsten or gold armor, and then a mini shark from the arms dealer so that I could start bossing. I found myself exploring the depths of the corruption and starting to make an arena for the Eater of Worlds and other bosses when the arms dealer decided to move in at the beginning of day 4. Immediately, I went back home to start selling my goods so that I could afford the mini shark, because I knew that would essentially carry me through the rest of pre-hard mode, and who doesn't want a weapon like that? So after acquiring one of my favorite weapons in pre-hard mode, I went back to the corruption to make a very sloppy and thrown together arena for the Eater of Worlds. And let me tell you, those harpies in a small world are freaking pesky. They do not leave you alone. As soon as you go like 10 feet in the air, they're flying down and they're shooting you with their feathers, and it's just like, give me a break here, you know? I was finally feeling confident and ready to take on my first boss of the game. I had set up a decent arena that would work for bosses of this scale, mined some mixed armor with gold, tungsten, and lead, as well as decked myself out with the GOAT of pre-hard mode, the mini shark. Descending into the depths below, it was finally time to take on my first boss, or so I thought, because just when you think things are going your way, the game has a mind of its own and decided to throw an extra challenge my way. With the help of my gear set up and decent amount of life crystals attained, I easily took down the first 2 bosses of the game in the same night when I definitely wasn't expecting to. Took my loot and made better gear to come back for round 2 on the Eater of Worlds when things, yet again, really didn't go as expected. I found what is a first for me, and that is a meteorite fallen through the corruption pit and down into the depths of the world below. Despite this small distraction, I was ready to fight again, and fight again I would try. This second fight proved to be just as easy as the first, but my greediness to finish this fight quickly led to my ultimate demise, my first death. Not only was this my first death of the game, but also the Eater of Worlds had next to no HP, just sprinkling more salt on my wounds. On day 5, I arose with confidence, knowing that these next few days would yield major progress. I started the day off by exploring the edges of my world to find the jungle and ocean biomes. Then, I found my way to the left side where I encountered the dungeon. Before night fell, I quickly constructed an arena that would be used to fight Skeletron that night and other bosses in the future. I knew that by killing Skeletron I would get access to some gear that I wanted, being the Mirror Massa and the Cobalt Shield. After making the arena for Skeletron, I went ahead and talked to the Clothier to release his curse. That's a dub. We take those. Got a Skeletron mask. After making quick work of Skeletron's hands, I then aimed to gun down his skull, which with the mini shark was going to be no problem at all. I finally freed the clothier from his curse and was allowed to access the darkness that is the dungeon. Riddled with skeletons, slimes, and ghostly mobs, I fought my way through the dungeon to find no Miramasa or Cobalt Shield, unfortunately. Come day 6, my goal was to continue advancing my loadout, and I saw it best to explore the floating islands to find a Star Fury. With a little help from a gravity potion, I was well on my way to soaring the skies in hopes of finding that illustrious pink sword. Days 7, 8, and 9 consisted of me building additional housing for more NPCs, mining out a elevator, and preparing for the Wall of Flesh. These activities didn't come freely though, because in the midst of all of it I had to fend off a blood moon to be followed by a goblin army. Both events were pretty easy to deal with, as I was nearing the stage of the game where I would enter hard mode, so my gear was pretty good, but nonetheless, I still had to kill them. Finally, on day number 10, I flung my way down to the underworld with my full stock of potions, battle platform, and mini shark ready to take down the Wall of Flesh. I took to the very left side of my platform, said my goodbyes to the guide before I threw his voodoo doll in the lava, and summoned the Great Wall of Flesh for what I hoped was to be an epic battle to serve as a prelude for what was to come in hard mode. Dispatched the Wall of Flesh in similar fashion to the other bosses of pre-hard mode, and with this kill I had officially entered hard mode. It took 10 days of mining, building, and fighting to reach this point, but in the end it was quite an easy journey with just one death due to my greed. At this stage of the game, I am now concerned with preparing for and fighting the mechanical bosses. First things first though, I have to use the Pwn Hammer that I got from defeating the Wall of Flesh to destroy the demon altars of the corruption to see which hard mode ores the world will get blessed with. Still on day 10, I headed to the pits of the corruption biome to replenish my world with those precious ores. Smashing almost all of the altars I could find, my world was blessed with cobalt, orichalcum, and titanium. I had the same thought process this time around as I did in pre-hard mode when it comes to progression via ores. I would mine the ores just enough to make a pickaxe that would be better at getting the next best ore, and wait to make armor until I got to titanium mining. For the most part anyways. Luckily for me, things started off quickly because there were lots of cobalt ore to be mined right next to all of the demon altars. For days 11 through 14, I spent most of my time progressing my pickaxe and armor from cobalt to titanium. I followed the process of going pick by pick until I reached a point where I felt confident in taking on one of the mechanical bosses. During my search for ores, I accidentally had my first fight with the Queen Bee, which turned out to be easy as it should be for this stage of the game. Unfortunately, right after executing the Queen Bee, her friend, the Jungle Creeper, who sat nearby waiting, had a few choice words for me. Jungle Creeper! I'm not going there for my titanium anymore. Yeah, I kinda screwed that one up when I kept slowing myself down in the honey that I literally just mined. Anyways, come day 14, I was feeling ready to start making the arena for the Mech Bosses. It wasn't anything too fancy, but I figured it would be good enough for the bosses I was going to face. Well, let's summon the Destroyer and find out if that's really true. Yeah, that didn't really work out so great. I noticed during the fight that one of my big issues was getting knocked back. If you remember from earlier, I hadn't been lucky enough to get a cobalt shield from the dungeon, so I wasn't immune to such penalties. I decided it would be beneficial to spend my time getting the cobalt shield, so on day 15 I did just that. Not only did I get a cobalt shield, but I got hit with the message that it was going to be a terrible night, and boy, were they right. So just like that, 2 nights in a row, I fought 2 different mechanical bosses and lost both times. The first time, I learned that I was going to need the Cobalt Shield, and the second time, I learned that I was going to need Spectre Boots. In this run, I hadn't managed to find a set of Hermes Boots in the early game, which never happens to me, so this was an unexpected turn of events, because I knew that those would greatly increase my odds of success. I spent the early half of day 16 on the prowl for a set of boots that would increase my movement speed. To my joy, I found a set of Hermes boots underground that I could combine with the rocket boots to make Spectre boots. At this point, I was feeling confident and just had to prepare my potions to fight the mechanical bosses. I went back home, made use of all my new accessories with an obsidian shield and Spectre boots, as well as full titanium armor, a titanium repeater, and a load of freshly brewed potions. It was time to truly take on my first mechanical boss, the twins. Why is the wyvern here? The battle went as expected for the most part since I was properly prepared this time. The wyvern made an unexpected but fun appearance in the battle. It's always a good time when things get just a tad more chaotic. Sadly, when I killed the wyvern, he was just out of bounds, so I was not able to retrieve the Souls of Flight from him. Fast forward a short bit, it's now day 17, and after my victory from the previous night over the twins, I was more than ready for a fight with the Destroyer and Skeletron Prime. I had used the hollowed bars from the twins to craft myself a new hollowed repeater for these fights. Come nightfall, I was once again ready to take on some more bosses. For my first challenger, I had the one and only Skeletron Prime. Just moments after making quick work of Skeletron Prime, I prepared myself for the Destroyer. Years ago, I used to think he was the easiest mechanical boss, and maybe he is once you get later in the game, but for me, at this stage, I actually felt like the twins are the easiest mechanical boss to fight. With my potions still active from the fight before, it was time for challenger number 2, the Eater of Worlds' robotic cousin, the Destroyer. Once again, another fight is in the books, as over the last 2 nights I managed to triumph over all 3 of the mechanical bosses, and now it's left to progress the game through the jungle. Days 18 and 19 I spent in the underground jungle with mobs galore as I hunted for that precious green, and no, I'm not referring to money, I'm talking about that sweet, sweet chlorophyte. 2 days of mining later, I was fully stocked up on chlorophyte bars and had a full set of chlorophyte gear made from it. At this point, I had thought something to myself. In all my years of playing Terraria, my houses have always been lame. Straight up. Every year I've loaded up Terraria and played, I'd make some variation of the world famous box house, and with maybe a few changes in block type or house design. For the most part though, my houses were nothing glamorous in any sense of the word, and I wanted to change that. As you've probably seen throughout this video, all my NPCs have been housed in wooden box units, so I decided I'd spend the next few days doing a house remodel, and here's how that went. For days 19 through 26, I spent the majority of the time tearing down my old base and constructing a new one. I wanted to stray away from the standard box shape and wooden materials that are typically used in building. In doing so, I began to make stone bricks for the build. I wanted to construct a base that looked slightly like a castle of some sort. At this point in my playthrough, I did not really have keen eyesight when it comes to decorating, so the base I would go on to make reflected that. In my head, I had this grand idea that when put to action did not come close to resembling it. Nonetheless, day after day, I spent my time gathering stone and making this new base. I had a rectangular room at the bottom for my crafting stations, 2 towers on either side that would house NPCs, and a structure of platforms in the middle for my chests, and also it served as a point for the NPCs to mingle. Every so often during the building process, I would get bored and feel the need to do a different task. On day 24, I knew that getting a Bast statue from the desert would be greatly beneficial for the fights to come, because when near it, players get a boosted defense stat. After finding the Bast statue, I took to the jungle to find life fruits to expand my HP. Whilst in the jungle, I figured now was as good a time as any to start making an arena for Plantera. The next few days leading up to day 26 were spent finishing the base by adding a small plant farm, finishing the arena for Plantera, and prepping potions as well. After a few days of building, I felt that the new base I had created was better than my first, but by no means was it special. I knew this, and so later in this video you'll find out what I do to solve that problem. This next segment of days were spent doing the endgame bossing. I left day 26 having finished the Plantera arena and prepping potions for the fights soon to come. On day 27, the battle to beat the game had begun. I made my way to the underground jungle, Bast statue in hand, potions loaded up, and fully geared to take down Plantera. I found my way to the Plantera bulb, smashed it, and within a second, the fight had started. After what was a pretty easy battle with Plantera, I still had my potions and buffs active from the fight. With the temple key I got from Plantera, I rushed to the temple and down to the bottom to fight the golem before the potions expired. Fighting my way through the temple, I made a very small platform to fight the golem on. I put my Lizard power cell into the Lizard altar and was more than ready to take on the golem. Taking out the golem in relative ease, I summoned him many more times to continue farming his loot while I was there and still had potions active. I felt that the fights with Plantera and the golem both went very smoothly, so I was thinking, maybe I can start doing the Moonlord now. Put my loot away, got prepped, and ran to the lunatic cultist to start what I had hoped would be the last string of battles. Keep in mind, I was doing all of this on day 27, so this was a very progressive day. After making my way to the lunatic cultist, I killed the worshippers and the battle soon began once again. That fight was definitely the hardest of the 3 I had on this day. Nonetheless, I prevailed and was victorious in taking down the lunatic cultist. Unfortunately, upon his death, the solar pillar spawned right near me, so all of the solar enemies were beginning to swarm me. In my opinion, of the 4 pillars, Stardust, Vortex, Nebula, and Solar, the solar pillar is the hardest to face. I was already down in HP from the battle with the lunatic cultist, so it did not take long for me to die by the hands of the solar enemies. When I spawned back in, it was day 28 and I was ready to take down the pillars. I knew that I was likely to die some more because I did not yet have 500 max HP, and with the gear I had, it was not exactly the optimal setup for these fights. Knowing this, I fought the first 3 pillars anyways so that I could get the fragments from destroying the pillars to make better weaponry for each subsequent pillar and fights for the future. I conquered the first 3 pillars and knew that if I killed off the 4th pillar, then the Moonlord would begin to spawn. I was not yet ready to take him on, so I spent day 29 searching the underground jungle for life fruits to help max my HP. On day 30, I kind of wanted to fight the Pumpkin Moon event, so I just did that, and at some point things got pretty hectic. Jesus Christ, holy shit! Oh my god. I never seen anything like that. Then on day 31, I was thinking, that was kind of fun. I kind of want to try the Frost Moon now. That event proved to be more tough than the Pumpkin Moon event, but, you know, it was alright to do. Days 32 and 33, I resumed my preparations for the Moonlord. I extended the arena for the battle, made beetle armor, which I would go on to forget to use, and made a place in the jungle for the Tiki NPC so that way I could get summoning accessories from him. Come day 34, I was finally feeling ready to take on the Moonlord. I went to the right side of my world and fought the Nebula Pillar. From there, I went back home and patiently waited as I knew that the fight with the Moonlord was right around the corner. I could feel his presence so close and was praying that this would be the final battle where I would claim victory over Terraria. Yep, I got obliterated. My first thought to solve this problem was to change from full Tiki armor to full Spooky armor. I was under the impression that I wanted to kill the Moonlord with summoning gear. I had planned to maximize my Stardust Dragon with the gear I had and use the Solar Eruption as a supplement to the damage. Just like in Pre-Hard mode, I knew that this game mode was easier than Expert and Master mode, where much more preparations are needed for battle. Because of this line of thinking, I had gone into that first battle with subpar potions. I did not want to do that again, so on day 35, I went fishing to make some higher tier potions. For me, fishing in Terraria is irrelevant, or usually it feels that way, for most of the game anyhow. It is only in these last battles that I feel the potions obtained via fishing are actually important to have. Maybe that's just me because in real life I'm not the biggest fan of fishing, so that transfers to video games. Or it really is just that fishing isn't that useful until you really need it in Terraria. Anyways, after fishing, I redid the Lunatic Cultists and Pillars to fight the Moonlord again. Here we go again for round 2 of the Moonlord. Oh baby, left side, right side, back to At this point, something became clear to me. I was an idiot. Earlier in the game, I had made beetle armor specifically for these battles. I knew that the increased defense and damage reduction would be greatly beneficial for my rates of success. For whatever reason, immediately after spending time to get the turtle shells and make the armor, I stashed it away in a chest and forgot about it. Well, it was now time that I remembered this and dusted off the goods to retake on the Moonlord one more time. It's day 37. I am geared in beetle armor, some summoning accessories, a daybreak, a stockpile of potions, and I was feeling the best I could possibly be at this moment for fighting the Moonlord. Sure, there are other accessories I could use that are better, but I used what I had, and so this was surely going to be enough. I finished off the pillars and began the long wait for the Moonlord to summon on my screen for what had to be the final time.
All I had to do was change up the armor.
I did it! I finally took down the Moonlord who had previously killed me a couple times before. It took some trial and error, but with enough mental fortitude, I powered through and beat him. I may have made some mistakes along the way, but as I said in the beginning of this video, I'm not a pro, and I don't know everything about Terraria, but I knew enough, and that was what helped me make it through. For the first time ever, I got to see the credits roll on day 38. I sat in my house and watched the whole thing as a way to reminisce on my time in the world of Terraria and what led me to that moment. When the credits stopped rolling, I used my loot from the Moonlord to make some gear and fight him one more time on this day. I was victorious again and made myself a full set of Vortex armor to be paired with my Space Dolphin machine gun. Feeling the strongest I had been in the game so far, I spent day 39 killing the Moonlord just a couple more times to get back all those painful moments he had made me feel just days earlier. And just like that, I completed one of the main goals of Terraria in killing the Moonlord. It took 37 days to do, which is by no means the fastest, nor the slowest, but I was happy with it. I now had to figure out how I would spend the next 61 days in the game, since on day 39 was when I stopped fighting him. This next period of time in my journey through Terraria Classic is what I call the Great Construction. I'd mentioned earlier that I was not satisfied with the new base I had made. I still felt that it was subpar. While better than the first, it was not good enough. This section of the game is actually where I spent the most time, which I find to be the most surprising. I've never been much of a builder in this game, but I was determined to change that now. I spent the next couple of days getting the other NPCs, where I found the Golfer on day 39 in the Underground Desert, the Tax Collector in the Underworld on day 40, and the Truffle arrived on day 41. I also fought the Pirate Invasion so that way I could get the Pirate NPC, and took my shot at my first battle with the Queen Slime. From day 42 to day 45, I built a housing structure for all my NPCs that I was intending to use for a different video, but ultimately decided against it. In that time, I made one of the best tools for building that I recommend for anyone, and that is the Grand Design. I knew that to make my base the way that I wanted it, I was going to need more space. Since I was playing in a small world, I knew that going up wasn't really an option because there was less space up there than I would have liked, and I didn't really want to deal with the lowered gravity, so I was going to need to dig out the earth. The fastest way to do that by hand was with the Shroomite digging claws, which are one of my favorite tools in the game to have. I made those and began mining out the earth on day 46. Since I wanted to mine out such a big area, I tried a new form of mining via dynamite. I've never used it before in this scale, so I was like, why not? To my delight, it actually worked quite well. It made mining feel more sectioned off and like I could go piece by piece instead of having to eat the whole cake at once, if that makes any sense. On day 48, I only confirmed what I've been saying this whole time. What do I want? Obviously, I want a better house. But how am I going to get a better house? For days 49 through 73, I spent tearing down the old base and constructing a new one. I have never spent so much time in Terraria dedicated to building a base that was unique, so I was not sure how it would go. I watched a video on how to build better in Terraria, and that honestly helped me with how I saw my building going. I wanted to have an area to spawn in, a chest room with all of my crafting stations, and then mini biomes/biome houses for my NPCs to live in. This was something new for me that I had never done before, which is perfect because rule number 3 for this video was that I wanted to try something new, and this was a large part of that. I'll let the clips play and you can watch a short time lapse of how I made my new base, or almost all of it because I didn't quite finish. After hours upon hours of building a new base, it was nearly done, but I was wanting to do something else. I was quite happy with what I had made so far and would finish it in the future. For days 74 through 77, I hunted down the best melee weapon in the game, the pinnacle of all swords, the Zenith. I fought the Moon Lord time and time again, praying for a Meowmer to drop that just wouldn't come. kill after kill after kill, I would get everything but the Meowmer. Finally, after around 16 kills and on day 76, I got the drop. All that was left for me to do was get the influx waiver from the Martian event and craft a copper short sword before I could make the greatest weapon in the game. I fought the Martians and managed to get lucky enough to receive an influx waiver, then used what copper I had found in chests earlier to build a copper short sword and was finally able to make my Zenith. On day 77, I gathered all 10 swords required for the build, headed to my crafting stations, and laid eyes upon Terraria's journey in sword form. I crafted my first ever Zenith and reforged it to the godly modifier. Wanting to test out the strength of my new weapon, I fought the Moonlord one last time to see just how good it was. Wow. This was the easiest I've ever killed the Moonlord. Oh, what the hell. After making the Zenith, I felt that all that was left to do in my world was for me to make some farms and polish my base. I spent the next several days mining to the edges of my world and placing asphalt so that I could run to either side more quickly. On day 79, I built a small slime farm that I needed in order to make asphalt for the runways. For day 80, I mined a giant hole in the dungeon for a future dungeon farm. Days 81 to 83 were spent making a glowing mushroom farm. Finally, days 84 and 85, I started to place glass background walls around my base so that way mobs would stop spawning around some of the biome housing islands. We have now reached the final section of not only this video, but of my 100 days spent in Terraria. For my final 15 days, I wanted to get all of the trophies for each boss, so that way I could make some sort of trophy haul in my base. I felt that an addition of this kind would be the cherry on top when it comes to playing 100 days in Terraria. Day 86, I began my trophy hunt with the Eater of Worlds. I went to the Corruption, mined out a giant space, and started farming rotten flesh for the Eater of Worlds spawner. Come day 88, and I had already killed the Eater of Worlds several times with no luck when it comes to getting the trophy. I was in need of more vile mushrooms for the spawner recipe, so I added a small vile mushroom farm to the spot where I farmed rotten flesh. Day 89, I spent mining out the underworld for a small voodoo farm for the Wall of Flesh trophy. Keep in mind, I hadn't yet obtained the Eater of Worlds trophy, I was simply waiting for the mushrooms to grow. So during these last days, I was all over the place, killing multiple bosses each day, sometimes different bosses on the same day. For example, just after doing this, I went and killed the Queen Slime. Day 90, I fought the Empress of Light, Destroyer, and the Twins multiple times, and yet again, still no trophies were dropped up to this point. The drop rate for a trophy is 10%, so I was kind of surprised at how long this was taking. Here, my worries started to begin that I wouldn't have enough time to get all the trophies before the 100 days were up. Day 91, and I went to fight Plantera, and lucky for me, my first kill dropped a trophy. Days 92 through 94, I spent mining out a giant area of the Underground Hollow that allowed me to farm Souls of Light and Rods of Discord. I was going to need these souls in order to make spawners for some of the mechanical bosses. On day 92, I fought the Twins and got a trophy from Spasmatism, but not Retinazer. Day 93, I built the Ankh Shield. Come day 95, and I had fought tens and tens of bosses of all different kinds and only obtained 2 trophies, which is pretty demoralizing as it was becoming a tedious task. I decided to fight the Frost Moon this night because I knew I would surely get trophies from some of the enemies there, and I did. I got an Everscream trophy. Day 96, I made statues that spelled out the channel name because why not? I fought the Torch God for the first time ever, and that was kind of interesting. On day 98, I went to my glowing mushroom farm and got truffle worms to spawn in Duke Fishron because up to this point I hadn't fought him yet. From here, I flew to my ocean biome and started fishing with my new bait. The fight turned out to be incredibly easy with my late game gear, so much so that it doesn't really deserve a fight sequence. Also on this day, I used the biome keys that I had been saving all playthrough long to open up the biome chests in the dungeon. I had the Corruption Key, Jungle Key, Hallowed Key, and Desert Key. I never got the Ice Key, and since there was no Crimson in my world, I didn't get a Crimson Key either. These chests are my favorite in the game because of their design and rarity. On day 99, I made a small dungeon farm to collect bones for Skeletron Prime summons. After collecting a decent amount of bones, I went home, made some spawners, and began to kill Skeletron Prime. After a short bit, I was lucky and got another trophy. As the night of day 99 comes to a close, the sun arises for my last day spent in Terraria, day 100. For my final day, I first began by continuing my farm for trophies. I killed many bosses on this day, and as a treat for making it this far, the Destroyer and Empress of Light both decided to be so kind as to drop me their trophies. The clips you've seen in this section of this video don't do it justice as to how many bosses I killed for how few trophies I got, but that's the way RNG goes sometimes, and it's also what keeps us coming back for more. Before my time in this world came to a close, I wanted to try out new dyes because I had never used them much in Terraria before. I turned in my strange plants to the dye trader and found that I had received tons of sweet dyes. I experimented with them and came to the conclusion that the Shadow Flame and Phase dyes were my favorite from the lot that I had. So here we are at the sunrise of day 101, and my time in this world has come to a close. It was a long journey of 100 in-game days and 40 real-life hours of playtime. It started with the idea that I wanted to get the feeling of the old Terraria classic that I remembered from years prior, but ended with a feeling of bittersweetness because my time had come to a close for a journey where I got to experiment with features that I never had used much before or at all. I made the best base I had ever made in Terraria, fought many bosses, died several times, and laughed because I got to have fun in a game that was so influential in my life years and years ago. This game has changed so much from what I remember it being, but I can say happily that even now this game is still just as much fun, if not more, than what it used to be. I really hope that everyone who has made it to this point of the video had a good time watching my journey through 100 days of Terraria Classic. This video took 40 hours to film and another 10 or so to edit. It's my biggest video ever, and making this kind of stuff isn't easy, but it feels worth it. If you agree with that, then I would greatly appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribed for more future content like this. In the end, I am super happy with the way this video and the game went. I really do believe that Terraria is one of the best games out there on PC, so if you haven't tried it yet, now is the time to go and get yourself this game. I'm telling you, Terraria is an absolute masterpiece.